Hey everybody! So, today what I'm going to talk about is specificity of detail, which is one of those aspects of writing that is very, very important, yet often undervalued. And one of the reasons it's so important is that the more specific the details you use in your writing, the more interested your audiences will be in what you have to say, and the more important information you can convey. For my example today, I'm actually going to use my experiences going to Airborne School in the Army. You'll notice I am wearing my 82nd Airborne baseball cap. Now, this is obviously not an Army issue hat or anything like that, but what I'm doing right now, this is an example of ethos. I'm indicating my authority to talk about this topic by showing off something that is associated with it. And when it comes to the military, that sense of ethos is very, very important. You know, there is a perceived divide between those who quote unquote get the military versus those who don't. And one of the reasons for that divide is that many people try to claim the ethos of the military even if they've never served. So part of what I'll be doing today is illustrating how to use specific details to kind of show aspects of a military experience. Obviously, my experience does not represent all experiences, but also I want to emphasize that just because someone has experience with something does not necessarily mean that their explanation will carry specificity of detail. Specificity of detail is a writing skill, whereas experience is a lived thing, okay? Experience and writing are two different things. You know, I have met some folks who have never served in the military who are able to write about it in ways that are incredible. If you read Mark Bowden's books on Somalia, oh my gosh, how am I blanking on the title? Or if you read Cornelius Ryan, who writes The Longest Day, or if you read Band of Brothers, you know, all of those books describe the military experience extremely well because those authors interviewed veterans who had been in those locations. Okay? And part of the reason those books are so effective is because they examined very precise details to show exactly what those experiences were. Now, for myself, when I talk about my own military experiences, I usually leave out a lot of details in conversation because in a regular conversation, most people aren't interested. But if I'm writing a story about the military experience, then presumably the readers are already interested in that experience. And so they're going to want more detail than, say, just my everyday friends who I talk to. So what I'm going to talk about today is a little bit about the airborne experience. And first what I want to do is give you an example of poor specificity of detail. So as an example, let's say I wanted to tell you I went to Airborne School. I attended in fall of 2004. It was a 3-week course where we did a lot of running, a lot of jumping off of tall podium things, a lot of smacking into gravel and rolling, and then we jumped out of an aircraft 5 times.
How tall are those poles?
Well, some of the podiums were probably about 6 to 10 feet high. Yeah, they were quite high. Now that question my son just asked from off screen, that's an important question because that detail right there changes the experience. If I said, oh yeah, we regularly jumped off a little 2-foot thing and rolled on the ground, that wouldn't say very much. Now it is true, we did start off on lower ones, but as we got better at it, we would move up to higher and higher ones. I don't remember the exact heights, but I'd say about a 6-foot high platform would be a fairly standard practice for jump for something called a PLF, which is a parachute landing fall. Now the addition of this term, the PLF, indicates that I know what I'm talking about because I've been there. Okay? If someone tries to talk about Airborne School and they don't use terms like PLF or jumpers hit it or 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, those terms, they indicate that I know what was happening there and what people were doing. That doesn't necessarily mean I was there. Anyone could find these terms out simply by interviewing airborne veterans. But they are the kinds of specific details that indicate insider knowledge. And when you write, you want to ensure that you have specific details that indicate that you have done quality research that incorporates insider knowledge, that incorporates knowledge from sources that are specific to that place, to that situation, to the individuals you are writing about. So, if I simply left it at, it was a 3-week course, we jumped out of an airplane 5 times, I hit the ground really hard, I kind of hurt my neck and my arm was really sore, all of that information is true, but not very interesting.
Like, you jumped out of an airplane and broke your wrist.
I did not break my wrist jumping out of an airplane.
Yeah, that's just an example.
That would be an example. Yes, that's true. Yes, as my son pointed out, if I had jumped out of an airplane and fractured a wrist, that would be a really good thing to talk about. Now, I have known people who jumped out of aircraft and broken bones and had serious injuries. I am not one of them. So another thing to emphasize with specificity of detail is that you want to ensure your details are accurate, that they are true. Now, it is true I was injured during Airborne School, and it is true I continued on anyway. But the injuries I had, obviously, were not so debilitating as some of the other injuries that some of my airborne buddies have had. So let's talk a little bit more about how do you zero in on these details. The first and most important thing is you want to choose your focus. You want to make sure that when you are writing, you are taking the broad topic and you are narrowing it down, zeroing in on what's important, what will draw interest, what will draw attention. And when we do our research, this is where your primary sources become very, very important. The primary sources are going to be the ones that are taken from that situation, from people who have been there, or from specific types of documentation illustrating what happened at that place at that point in time. Now, myself, right now, if you interviewed me about Airborne School, I would count as a primary source. Okay. This video that I am putting up would be a primary source about Airborne School, okay, because it is from a perspective of someone who was there. I'm talking specifically about it. I want to point out, however, that this video, the purpose of it, the rhetorical purpose, is to teach a writing skill. Therefore, it would not be a good primary source for Airborne School because I will not go into enough detail about Airborne School to support a paper about Airborne School. Okay? So when we talk about rhetoric, when we talk about genre, it's important to look at what people are doing, how they are using rhetoric. Okay? Everything I've mentioned about my experiences builds on my ethos, okay? Emphasizing my authority to talk about Airborne School. But the purpose of this video is to talk about writing. And so for that, I might mention, I have my MFA in creative writing. I have a PhD in English studies with a focus in creative writing and rhetoric. That would build up my ethos as an instructor. I might talk about how I have 11 years of experience teaching writing. Again, building my ethos as an instructor. And what I'm doing there is providing some details that indicate, hey, I should be an expert on what I'm talking about. But these are not specific details. Okay? And so what I want to do is show you how do you get the specific details that will indicate real, authentic stories the full authority of knowing a situation. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus in and I'm going to take this broad topic of, how would I talk about Airborne School and narrow it down to a single jump. Okay, my first jump from an aircraft. Now, if you've watched any videos of airborne operations, the videos themselves will show, lines of paratroopers lined up. They'll have their static lines hooked into a cable up, running down the center of the aircraft. And these details are the types of things you would definitely want to include because they indicate what an Army airborne operation looks like. Okay, if I just said, oh, they jump out of an aircraft and they pull the ripcord and the parachute opens, one, that's not detailed, and two, it's actually wrong. When you are in an Army airborne operation, the aircraft is too low to the ground. There is not time to pull a ripcord. And so you have a nylon cable. It's fairly thick, generally about 15 feet long, depending on what aircraft you're jumping out of. For a C-130, it's about 15 feet. You would clip it into a steel cable that runs the length of the fuselage. You would step forward. You would hand that cable to a jump master. All right, and the jump master pulls that cable aside so that as you step out the door, that cable will not tangle in your arm or on your body or on anyone else. All right, this is a key detail because it indicates part of the dangers of jumping out of an aircraft. When you are jumping out of the aircraft is flying, if I recall, about 130 miles per hour. And this is a C-130, a fairly slow cargo plane. It can slow down to quite a low velocity for a fixed wing aircraft. Now I do want to emphasize something here. I do not know for sure if that detail is accurate. I don't know if a C-130 can slow down to 130 miles an hour. Maybe it was faster, maybe it was slower. Now, I may be a primary source. That does not mean all my information is accurate. So you hand off that static line. You step out the door. All right. One of the misconceptions of airborne operations is that everyone jumps out the door. You're actually supposed to step. Okay. The reason being is that if you jump, your body is more likely to twist as you exit the aircraft, and that can actually cause all of those, the cords going from your backpack up to the parachute to get twisted into a straight line rather than going outward in a cone. That would be bad. You want your parachute to open wide. You don't want it twisted into a narrow cone. And so that's why you step out of the aircraft. And so all of these details, they're very specific, they're very pointed, and something I want to emphasize is that these are details of the general experience. Okay? Those are not my experience of my first jump. Okay, my first jump, I was the third in line in my chalk. The chalk is the line of paratroopers exiting the door. And so there, first person in line, he's there, he's already handed off his static line. He is facing the door as it opens to the air whipping past. Okay, the door is behind these, spinning engines, the spinning turboprops on a C-130 cargo plane. These are very large, loud engines. The wind was a physical force. And, then there was a second person in front of me, and then I was the third person. The door opens up, and I'm afraid of heights. So I see this door opening, and I am like, oh. My first thought is not appropriate for a public video for teaching. But yes, I was like, oh. So, first guy, then they've got the red light, then the green light comes on. Jump master says go. First person, he steps out the aircraft. I don't really remember him stepping out because my eyes are just fixed on the blue sky out there. That blue sky rushing past. Alright? Second person and I and everyone behind us, we all step forward. Okay, second person hands off his line, he turns, goes out the door. Again, I don't remember him doing that because I was just paying attention to, oh crap. All right. And also making sure I step forward and do all the steps. All of these things that have been drilled into us over the course of 2.5 weeks before those first jumps. So I focus. Second guy goes out, I step forward, I slide my static line forward, I hand it to the jump master, and then I turn to the door, I put both my hands on my reserve parachute, and I have no memory whatsoever of what happens next. None. All right. I was so afraid of the wind outside the aircraft door that my entire mind went blank. Okay, I don't remember stepping out the door. I don't remember leaving the aircraft. I don't remember any of that. These details are important because they are different from the description you will see in How to Jump Out of an Aircraft. They are different from the experiences of many airborne personnel. Most folks who volunteer to go airborne are not as afraid of heights as I am. Okay. I know several people who love jumping out of aircraft. They get a thrill out of it. I never did. And that's a weird admission to make. I'm really proud of my airborne service. I'm really proud that I volunteered to become a paratrooper. It hurt a lot, I'll be honest. But I never enjoyed the jumping part. And I didn't do very many jumps. I only have 6 jumps total. As an airborne paratrooper, that is tiny. I got hurt. I couldn't jump anymore. Most airborne personnel have far more jumps. They could talk in far more detail about their experiences. And one of the reasons I tell you this limitation is that the limitations of what you know are also very important for specificity of detail. Okay? If you have a source that emphasizes, oh, I know everything, that's not a very credible source. You want to find sources that give specific information about specific events without exaggeration, without fabrication, without, you want sources that are not going to mislead you or your audiences. Now, for myself, as I mentioned, I have no memory of leaving the door. My memory wakes back up as I am in the air counting out loud. When you step out of the aircraft, you're supposed to shout 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000. Okay? Just before you hit 4,000 in your count, the main parachute is supposed to open up. Okay? And you have your head tucked down, your chin touching your chest, so that when that main parachute opens and it yanks against your body, because remember, you're in free fall until that parachute opens. You don't want whiplash. If that parachute opens and your head is up high, you're going to your neck is going to be real bad shape. All right, and this is why they spend 2.5 weeks drilling you on how to exit an aircraft and how to land. So with no memory of what was going on, with basically totally blanked out, my mind on autopilot essentially remembered to tuck in my chin, keep my hands over the reserve parachute, and to count 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, and as I'm counting 3,000, 4, and then this parachute yanks my whole body upward, and I'm like, and then I woke up. I remember what was happening after that. I kind of remember being in the air. I kind of remember coming down to the ground. I don't know if it was this jump or my second and third jumps, but there were some times where the cords to the parachute were twisted and tangled. So I remember doing my bicycle kick to help my body untwist those cords so the parachute would open wider before I reached the ground. Again, important detail. The fact that I don't remember for sure if it was the first jump or another jump indicates the level of stress that I felt during those jumps. My memory was not clear because of just all just the adrenaline and the fear coursing through my veins. So, after all that, after all the blanking out and all this stuff, my the rest of the jump was straightforward. I came down, I hit the ground, end of story. No, if you want to talk about an airborne jump, you need more specific details than that. Many folks are familiar with skydivers because you have quite possibly seen a skydiver landing. If not in person at, say, an air show, then through videos or friends who have talked about it. When skydivers leave an aircraft, their parachutes are much larger than Army airborne parachutes. When they come down on the ground, they can actually have enough control to glide in and then land, and they can actually keep walking as they're landing. If you've ever seen the Army Golden Knights, those are military skydivers, and they can have enough control that they can land on a very precise area of ground, and they don't even hit the ground, really. They just kind of land on it and walk on their feet and keep going. With the Army Airborne, you hit the ground at about 18 to 22 feet per second if everything goes right. Okay, so when I hit the ground, that first jump, my feet hit, and I already had my body curved, and then I didn't do it quite right, so I went feet, butt, head, thunk, thunk. It kind of hurt. This is why they have foam padding in the back of the helmet for airborne operations, so that if you bump the back of your head, it won't be too bad. Now, that landing wasn't terrible. It wasn't great, but I wasn't hurt too bad. I did have a neck injury going into it, so it got worse with each jump, and that was what eventually ended my time as a paratrooper. But it was a landing. It worked. I walked away from it. And as I was sitting there, I started curling up the parachute. And remember how I mentioned I don't remember leaving the aircraft? Another paratrooper, he landed, and he was less disoriented than I was. So he got all his stuff cleaned up. He grabs his bag, he runs up to me, and he's like, "Dude!" I'm looking at him, just totally confused. He's like, "Dude, Jumpmaster had to kick you out of the plane." So apparently, my first jump in Airborne School, I didn't jump out of the plane. Apparently, I was kicked out. And I honestly don't know whether that's true or not, because one, I don't remember it. Two, I don't even know if he saw me or another paratrooper. I have no idea. But I'm pretty sure he's right, because given my state of mind at that moment, it would not surprise me at all if I froze. And some of you may be thinking, that's horrible. Why would they kick you out of a plane? And the fact is that if you are in the military, and if you were in a combat situation, if someone froze up, you would want to make sure to keep them going however you can. And so they do that in training as well. And remember before I told you about that static line hooked to a steel cable that runs the length of that fuselage. That's the reason Army Airborne does not have pull cords. If someone is frozen up, if someone is, say, injured, disoriented, any number of things, the aircraft will pull your parachute open, which is an important safety feature. In Airborne School, they used to tell us that Army Airborne operations were statistically safer than skydiving. I do not know whether or not this is true, but if it is true, that would be the reason for it. So, what I hope you have gathered from this talk is that when you do provide information, you want to make sure that you are finding details specific enough to really zero in on what an experience is like. You want to draw from primary sources that have first-person or first-hand accounts to really illustrate this is what happened or this is what this experience is like. You want to ensure that you are doing more than simply echoing what everyone else thinks about a topic. Okay. I could very easily talk about the military experience as this very proud, very patriotic, very dignified thing that people do. And, that is a narrative we hear all the time. But that is not my experience of jumping out of an aircraft my first time. And when you find primary sources, you want to ensure that they are talking, that they're very narrow in their focus and that they are zeroing in on an exact event rather than simply saying, oh, this is how it is for everybody. Okay. When you do your writing, you want to find very precise examples. Okay. If I said, oh yeah, all the paratroopers, they hand the cable off and they jump out and the aircraft pulls open the parachute for them and everybody lands and it's much safer than skydiving, all of those things may be true. I say maybe because I don't know the statistics. But those details are not very interesting. They don't give the perspective of a specific paratrooper, of a specific person. Okay. And the other thing a primary source should do is that it should allow you to compare different situations or different individuals in the same situation. Okay, I have a number of friends, like I said, who love jumping out of aircraft. They'll volunteer for extra jumps. One, because it's thrilling. Two, because in the Army Airborne, the more jumps you have, the kind of the more respect you earn. So with that, I hope this video has been helpful for illustrating the importance of specificity of detail. And if you have any questions, please post some comments or just let me know. And with that, I will see everyone in the discussions.